Drush Hey, the fifth Drush of Parshat Chayah. This one is a little bit more intricate in detail, a little bit more unique in that regard. But as an introduction, I'd like to offer or bring everyone's attention to the idea that the Zohar Kodesh mentions about Marat HaMachpelah. We know that Marat HaMachpelah was unique to Avram Avinu. It has a special place. But the Zohar Kodesh says that many years before Avram Avinu actually going to buy Marat HaMachpelah, many years before, the Zohar Kodesh says that Avram Avinu actually knew about it and heard about it, and he bought it. He was thinking about it already then. The question is, Avram Avinu already saw the unique aspects of Marat HaMachpelah many years prior to Sarah's passing. The question is, what about Ephron? How did Ephron not see that? So the point the Zohar Kodesh mentions, without going into detail about what he saw, but it's a matter of perspective, right? Based on the person's greatness and based on the person's spiritual level, that we can see two things, the same thing, the two aspects of the same coin can be viewed differently. So Avram Avinu saw. The Zohar mentions Adam Arishon. He mentions Gan Eden. The Zohar mentions Gan Eden and many other things. And of course, that's because Avram's spiritual level, he sees the greatness of Marat HaMachpelah. But Ephron Achiti, who was just a regular person, he looked at Marat HaMachpelah as just another sadeh, just another field, or just another piece of real estate. So that's just something for us to teach us about perspective about the same area, about Marat HaMachpelah, and that will introduce us a little bit to what is going on with this whole idea of the sale. So this is Drush 5 on Parshat Chayah. The pasuk says, "Asadeh natati lecha v'amara asher bo." This is talking about the purchase of Avram Avinu's purchase and business dealings with Ephron, but in advance or in preparation for burying Sarah Imenu. So it says, I've given you the field and also the Ma'ara, and I'll give it to you in front of everyone. How could it be that, first of all, we look at the Psukim, we see that Ephron was kind of really being very generous, and then he said he would give it to him as a field, and then he wants to sell it, right? So the question is, how could he, are you either trying to give it as a gift or you're trying to buy it or sell it? Which one is it? You can't be both. So he says that so he says that in front, what many of the Mefarshim say is that when Ephron wanted to give it to him as a gift, he didn't say that. He only said that in front to counter what Bnei Chet were saying, is that in case, so that they would not come the next day and say that they were going to come to Avram and say Mishum Dina Devar Mitzra. They're going to say as the law of adjacent properties. They're going to say is, oh well, if the Gemara in Baba Batra and many other places, and Baba Metzia mentioned the idea of Bar Mitzra, which is basically that my field is connected to yours, so really that should be mine. And so Bnei Chet, in front of Bnei Chet, Ephron says, no, this is a gift. It doesn't belong to anyone else, and therefore Bnei Chet can't come back later to say, oh wait, Avram, Ephron, after he passed, he really didn't mean that. It's actually ours. Right? Ephron, that's why he said, in view of the children of my people, meaning in front of I've given it to you as a gift. In their eyes, I'm giving it to you as a gift, so they can't come back and take it back. And he says, right? When the law of the bar mitzvah, meaning the adjacent property, the neighbors, you can't, in the laws of being a neighbor, you can't take back something that was given to him as a gift. But however, Ephron later, if you look at the psukim later, it says, but between you and me, Avram, what is 400 shekel, right? So he says, privately, there would be some sort of exchange of money. So now we kind of begin to unfold this kind of another layer of what's going on with this business deal. So he says, Zera Shimshon says, this doesn't make sense. Right? Avram should have given all the money to Ephron privately. רצינו שנתן לו הכסף לעיני כולם, right? כי דכתיב וישקול אברהם לעפרון את הכסף אשר דיבר באוזני חטא, right? The משמע שכבר ידעו מהכסף, right? So if we look at the psukim, and this is again, it shows you the greatness and the intricate focus and the detail that the Zera Shimshon takes every pasuk and every word and analyze every word. If we look at the psukim, it's clear that it seems to me, at least based on him, based on the Zera Shimshon, it seems that Avram Avinu took the money and all the money and the dealing of the money was known to everyone, meaning the 400 shekel was not just a private, behind closed doors kind of agreement, but rather it was done in some sort of Bnei Chet knew about this business dealing. So he says, even though we said that regarding the law of Bar Mitzvah, meaning the neighbor explanation, it's meaning that it was a gift to Avram, and therefore the Bnei Chet don't have any sort of argument or don't have some sort of statement claim on the land. It says, if Avram wanted to purchase, if he really wanted to purchase, he should have gone to Ephron first. Then if he really wanted to get it from Ephron, so go Ephron first. Why do you have to go even to deal with Bnei Chet? That was in order to get their permission beforehand. Right? He sort of says, why do you go first to Bnei Chet? What the Zera Shimshon is saying is, if you really want to get the land as a gift, so go first to Ephron and get it as a gift. Why does he have to go first Bnei Chet, then Ephron, and come back and then make a business deal? מכל מקום, עדיין קדושה ראשונה במקום עומדת, שאם כבר נתנו לו רשות לקנות, אין עוד צריך שאפרון יאמר ליתנה לו מתנה. Right? So he says, our first question remains and becomes even more difficult as he says that if for once they already have permission for Avram to purchase the field, then Ephron, there's no more reason for Ephron to give it to him as a gift. Once they said, yes, we agree that it's going to buy, that we're willing to sell, so fine, then it's done. Then there's no reason to go to Ephron and say, okay, for Ephron to say, all right, give it to me I'll give it to you as a gift. It's either we say, right, what the Mefarshim are saying is either the reason that Ephron gave it to a gift as to Avram was so that there would be no claim of Bnei Chet later on. But now we said that Avram solved this issue by getting the consent of Bnei Chet first, and then there's no reason for everyone to pretend that it was a gift. So we have basically he's saying is that the first Perush is a nice one to say that Bnei Chet would have no claim because it's a gift. That's nice, but the point is that if Bnei Chet agreed to the business deal, meaning that we're willing to sell it to Avraham, so then why does Ephron afterwards have to say, I'll give it to you as a gift? So that's his question. So then there's one more difficult that they ask, Mal Vayakum Ste Ephron, right? If you look, why does it say that it literally was confirmed or rose, or Vayakum means rose up, right? To be as part of the purchase. Afal Pisha Rashi Perish Kumai Talo. Rashi says that in Midrash, in some sort of midrashic sense, it says that it was elevated from the style of the feel of the commoner, kind of going back to what we mentioned as the introduction of the Zohar, right? That the field, from Ephron's eyes, the eyes were just simple. The field was just a simple field in Ephron's eyes. But Avram kind of elevated back to the status of Marat HaMachpelah and the significance that right? The matter nonetheless requires some sort of explanation as to what does it mean Vayakum? I mean, why we have to use the word elevated? Va'od, and another difficulty, which is again another beautiful component of what the Zera Shimshon is all about, is it shows us the many aspects and questions and layers that sometimes we view psukim so many times we don't even think about it. He says, right? If we look at the psukim later on, as it says, later on in this week's parsha, we learn about Avram Avinu's passing, and there it says that the pasuk says that Avram bought it from Bnei Chet, but that's not the case. He bought it from Ephron. So why does it mention the fact that he bought it from Bnei Chet in this pasuk? Sorry, he mentioned the pasuk later on. I'm sorry, the purchase that later on in the pasuk, and then if we look at the pasuk, right, it says that's in Parakaf Hey, and then if we look later on in Parshat Vayechi, it says Avram kanesadam Ephron. There it says he purchased it from Ephron Achiti. There's two verses. The two psukim seem to contradict themselves. Either Avram Avinu bought it from Bnei Chet, or he bought it from Ephron, but it can't be both. So that's why Zera Shimshon is again showing his greatness and understanding of the different psukim and understanding the words and how each word that is mentioned in the Torah is obviously there's a reason for it. So he has a couple of questions. The first question is, why is it that he gives it? Why does Ephron have to give it to him as a gift? Because if the sale was public knowledge, then once it's a sale, it's a sale. Then Ephron doesn't have to come back and say it's a gift, because once Bnei Chet agreed to the idea that they agreed to the purchase. There's no other. Once it's a purchase, it's done. And why does Ephron have to then say it's a gift? And then if it's a gift, then the purchase is, if it's a gift from Ephron, then the gift they have the Bnei Chet have no claim. The second question that he asks, which is, what is the word vayakom? Why does it mean that it kind of elevated itself? What does that mean? That should it be vakana? It should be really, it should be used a better term of that the purchase was done. Some sort of word that kind of signifies purchase or closing the deal, as opposed to vayakom, which means really to elevate or rose, right? And then the third question he asks is, if you look at the later psukim, both in this week's parsha and in Parshat Vayechi, those two psukim, the one at the end of this week's parsha, it says that Avram purchased the land from Bnei Chet, and in Parshat Vayechi it says, it says he purchased the land from Ephron. So which one is it? So there's another contradiction. That's the second another difficulty. And the last one, it says, Lama lo katav kara vayikan Avraham et hasadeh et Ephron bechesef 400 shekel. Why didn't it say at the end? Why is it not written in the pasuk that says Avram bought the field from Ephron for 400 shekel? Kamoshe katuv David vayikan David et Agorin bechesef shkalim 50. Right? Why doesn't it say Ela katav yishkol Avram leEphron shenira shelo beder kinyan natanalo? So it says. Then we have a question. He says another great point is, like we mentioned, and similar to the second one, kind of like an addition to the second question, is why doesn't it mention the fact that Avram says here's the money, and now the purchase is done. Now it's the seal. He brings a proof. The Zera Shimshon brings a proof from Tanakh where David HaMelech actually buys for 50 shkalim, and he actually buys. And the pasuk says vayiken, be purchased. So why doesn't the pasuk mention here that the fact that Avram actually purchased it? So he's asking several very great questions about this entire business dealing that's going on, and all of them are surrounding the idea of there's this concept of a business deal, and it doesn't really show us that the business deal actually took place. And in fact, it shows us that in some places it's talking about it as a gift, and some places it's talking about a business deal. Which one was it? And why not talk about the business deal as a final business deal instead of just trying to kind of dance around the subject? So in order to resolve this issue, that the Zera Shimshon raises, or the many issues that the Zera Shimshon answers or questions and raises, he says there's a whole idea, this is in Gemara in Kedushin. It says, "If Yuvan b'may de Garsin b'per Gimel de Kedushin, Rav Gidel have a mahapich b'hi ara azal Rabba Abba Zabina azal Rav Gidel kabli Rav Zera." Right. So he says there's a whole story. The story is in Per Gimel of the Kedushin and Daf Nun Tet Amud Aleph, and it mentions that basically Rav Gidel was making efforts to buy a piece of land, and then he went to Rav Abba to buy, and Rav Abba went and bought it first. So once Rav Gidel learned about this, he went and complained about it to Rav Zeira, and Amarle, my time avad marhachi. Why did you do this? Amar le lo yadana. I didn't know that Rav Gidel was going to purchase the land. Basically, there was a conflict. Rav Gidel was going to purchase a piece of land. Rabbi Abba went and kind of undermined him and bought it beforehand, before he was able to finish the deal. This happens all the time. And nowadays, when someone is in the process of getting a mortgage or whatever, someone else comes in and buys the land. Obviously, it's not the right thing to do. But here, what we see in the Gemara, it happened already. My time avad marachi. Why would it happen? Like, why did you do this? So Rabbi Abba says to him, I really didn't know that Rav Gidel wasn't trying to purchase land. Had I known, of course, he was never going to purchase it. Like that, the two people would have said, if I knew, I didn't know. If I knew, I wouldn't have done it. So he says, let's go. He says now to the situation. He says, Rav Yitzchak persisted, and he says, let me give it back to him. Amar le zabuni le lo mizabuni le. I will not sell it to him. The ara de kaimaitehi. For it's the first piece of land that I ever owned. Lo misaman milta. He says that I'm not going to sell it to him because it's my first piece of land. The Gemara seems to say that it's not a good simana milta. It reminds us of what we do on Rosh Hashanah. It's also called the simana milta, the simanim, right? So it's not good luck, it's not good fortune to buy the first piece of land to sell off the first piece of land you ever own. It's something that people kind of have a connection to. We see it nowadays too. People who are businessmen also, they have that first storefront. They always keep it, even though it may not be the one making the most money, because it's the first one. It's not a good idea. Ibai, Ibaila, instead, if he wants it, but matana nishka, let's give it to him as a gift. Meaning, Rav Gidol lo nachitla. Rav Gidol, however, would not enter the property. He would not accept the land. Rav Gidol said, I'm not going to go. It's nice that you give me a gift, but I don't want a gift. I feel uncomfortable. So what happened? The land laid fallow. Lomar nachitla, velomar nachitla. So at the end, Rav Gidol did not enter because he did not wish to take a gift, because we know that soneh matanot yichya, a person who takes or despises or pushes away gifts, he's the person who's going to really live a long life. And Rav Abba did not enter because he did not want it. He didn't want what should have been rightfully gone to Rav Gidol. So Mikarya Arya Rabbanan, thus became basically the land that was called the land of the rabbinic students, Adkan. So he's saying is that basically what happened is they, in essence, even though they didn't agree to it or they didn't mention it, that what happens is the land become basically the land for the Chachamim. It became kind of like an open for everyone, and that land became the fruits and everything around it became known as the land of the Rabbanan, of the students. Now we can understand if we go back to the story of Ephron and Avraham, we can now kind of understand what's happening. And this shows us the greatness of how Zera Shimshon's thinking and his understanding of Gemara and his holding of Gemara and understanding of different topics. It says here, here too we can explain, when we look at the story now, we say Ephron first told Avram that he would give the Marat HaMachpelah to him as a gift. He didn't want to sell it. It was not good. It was not a good luck for him. It was viewed to him as it would be not considered right to do it. It seems to him, right? And then obviously we know that Avraham was such a level of hulo ratzah b'mecher. So he obviously we know Avraham was at a level of tzadikut that he didn't want to give it as a gift. He didn't want to receive it as a gift. So because of his tzidkut, he says, no, I'm not going to take it as a gift. I can't do that. Right? We kind of understand we are familiar with these kind of things. Oh, I want to give you a gift. No, I don't want to take a gift, kind of thing. So it seems to imply, obviously, the Zera Shimshon seemed to imply that this piece of Ma'arat HaMachpelah was Ephron's either first or close to one of his first pieces of land, because otherwise, why would this whole idea of I want to give it to you as a gift, because it's not Siman Milta, it's not a good Siman. But either way, we understand that Ephron didn't want to give it to him as a gift, and Avram didn't want to accept the gift because it wouldn't be considered a good to sell off. For Ephron, it wouldn't be considered good to sell off the piece of land because it's probably one of his first pieces of land. And Avram didn't want to accept it as a gift because he's not a person that accepts gifts, right? Marlo, Eretz Arba Mil Shekel Kesef. He said the land. Ephron said to him, listen, let me explain to you. The land is worth 400 shekel between you and me. Ramazlo Shoviakar. He said, he's kind of like a hint. He says it's 400 shekel. If I really were to sell it, it's going to be 400 shekel. But I'm not selling it because that's not who I am. Kadeshi claim lo Avraham, so that would give him the amount of lo b'torat mekach umekach, not as an actual purchase. So that way, what was going on here? Ephron says, "Listen, the value of the land is 400. I can't tell you that it's worth. I can't tell you the actual purchase price because it would be a business deal, and I'm not allowed to. Ephron, can't go against my business deal because it's a piece of land that it wouldn't be good luck, considered good fortune for me to sell the piece of land that is, I guess, his first piece of land." And Avraham. Right? He says he didn't give the money as actual payment for the value because he didn't. Ephron said he didn't give you the actual property value. He didn't want to make it an actual business deal. So he said, and that's why it's never written the word kinyan. There's no actual kinyan here, even though we may in other mefarshim and other explanations you may understand that there is a kinyan here, but in this case, Zera Shimshon is understanding it is not actually. And actually, there's no word of kinyan here because it wasn't actual kinyan. When there's a kinyan, when there's an actual purchase, you say the land is worth 400 shekel. I give you 400 shekel. You give me the deed to the house, and it's done. In this case, because Ephron, this was his first piece of land, he didn't want to sell it because it's considered misfortune. So Avram says, okay, I can't take it as a gift. So he says, well, if you can't take it as a gift, I just wanted to let you know that the land is worth approximately 400 or so shekel, and therefore he says, okay, I'll give you the land, I'll give you the value of what you just told me. It doesn't tell you the actual. I don't know the actual land, or I can't tell you the actual purchase price of the land. And that's why it never mentions the idea of kinyan, as is written, because the money was never given as an actual purchase. Just saying is, here's 400 shekel to make me not feel like it's a gift. So I'm not giving you a gift. I'm just giving you the value of something close to the value of the piece of land. So that way it's not a gift, but it's also not a purchase. I'm leaving it on the table kind of thing. So now we understand why Ephron did not kind of renege on his original saying statement that it was a gift, and there was no actual sale. So now we can understand, and this is where the Zera Shimshon kind of filters or kind of finishes off all the other questions he has. Now that we see that Ephron immediately declared that he was giving his gift as a gift, he relinquished his ownership. When Avram was unwilling to accept it, he did not acquire it. It becomes what? It becomes sort of owned as soon as Ephron says. As soon as Ephron said it's a gift, so Ephron kind of relinquished his rights. Avram doesn't accept it as a gift, so now it's kind of like belongs basically, it's public land to Bnei Chet, right? That becomes hefker to Bnei Chet. Kiyahi the Rav Gidel, just like Rav Gidel. Mishum hachi nikrash Avram kinam eit Bnei Chet kishnatana kesel Ephron. That's why it says, the pasuk says that it became that when we look later on in the psukim, it says he bought it from Bnei Chet, right? They gave the money to Ephron. It was considered as though he acquired the field from Bnei Chet, meaning the way that Zera Shimshon is understanding, again, beautiful understanding of the whole concept, is that what happened is once Ephron takes the land and says, I'm giving it to you as a gift, he relinquished the rights from it and now becomes basically no man's land, or becomes property belonging to Bnei Chet. Avram gave money. He says, I'm not taking a gift from you because I'm not allowed. It's he says, okay, here's 400 shekel just in case, the value I'm just giving, so it's not a gift. Okay, it's kind of like, it sounds like a little bit of a loophole or a little bit of back and forth, but it really makes sense, right? So now we can understand all the different contradictions of the psukim. Everyone says, I'm giving it to you as a gift. Once he says that, it's given to Avram as a gift. Avram says, I don't want it as a gift, so now it becomes no man's land. And then Avram says, here's 400 shekel in lieu of the gift, so that way I'm not taking a gift. And now that's why the pasuk later on, it says, he bought the money, he bought the land from Bnei Chet, because the land was officially Bnei Chet's land, because Ephron had relinquished his rights. And since there was since in this specific situation there wasn't a full gift and a full purchase, right? Now he goes back to the question that we asked, why does it say Vayakum? Because there was never a full kinyan on either direction, right? So he says, for a transfer to Avram's possession, once he gave the money to Ephron, since he didn't really purchase the field from Ephron, because it doesn't say, right? It doesn't say, he never bought it because it didn't belong to Ephron. So that's part one, meaning Ephron relinquished his rights. So there was no full purchase or full gift from Ephron's side, and there was never a full purchase from Bnei Chet's side, because the money that Avram gave was not the actual value, and it didn't belong to Bnei Chet. It was kind of like no man's land. It was public property. So he didn't buy it from Ephron because he wasn't willing to. There was no kinyan there, right? And there was no kinyan from Bnei Chet. So in some ways he gave money in lieu of the land. It wasn't an actual purchase. So what do we say is that basically so that's why it says Vayakom Asadeh, meaning it was confirmed. Right, so it kind of rose up to become Avram's, but it didn't actually. There was no actual business dealing, and it didn't become a actual business dealing with a tender and like a whole deed, because it had a different status. So he says another solution to this whole idea, maybe he says, right? We could have offered another answer. He says that Bnei Chet could have said, listen, your claim that Bnei Chet could have said that claimed that based on the law of this property is adjacent to ours, right? So by Nikrash Avraham Kanah et Bnei Chet, he said we consider that Avraham bought the land from Bnei Chet, Bishum Hachi Kativ Asada Asher Kana Avram et Bnei Chet, is therefore rewritten that's why the pasuk says later, it's not written from Ephron, because it was as though Avram also had also bought it from them. The lav hachi ein kinyan no me'Ephron klum. So since otherwise, without accepting their permission, right, his acquisition or his purchase from Ephron would have been ineffective. Now we can understand, although we previously said that Ephron did not purchase the field, nevertheless, since in truth Ephron lo silek yadav mimeno el kadeshi yizkeh ba'Avram. The only reason that Ephron relinquished his ownership of the field was so that Avram could acquire it. Voche kibel kesef t'muratan. Ephron received money from it. Katav kra achar kach beParshat Vayechi shekanam Ephron. So he says that what basically all the psukim now makes sense. Now in this week's parsha, in the beginning, it says that there's back and forth in negotiation because Ephron basically does. He says it's a gift. Avram doesn't want to get the gift, so he says, "Well, what's 400 shekel among friends, right?" So that implied to Avram that the value of the land is 400 shekel, and he gives 400 shekel to Ephron, not as a gift, but he says in lieu of the gift, here's 400 shekel. So that already shows that Ephron was relinquished his rights. The land becomes Bnei Chet, and explains why Avram had to go through Bnei Chet first, because he wanted to see if he can buy it from them first, and then he says, "No, go to Ephron." Ephron says, "I don't want to sell it to you. I want to give it to you as a gift." Avram says, "I'm not allowed to receive a gift." And now Ephron says, "But I can't sell it to you because it's my first piece of property," as we mentioned the Gemara in Kedushin in Nun Tet. And so the Gemara there says that it's the first piece of property you should never really sell. So he says, "Well, I give it to you as a gift." Avram doesn't want a gift, but he says, "Well, it's 400 shekel. What's 400 shekel among friends?" So Avram understood that to be the price of the land. So he gives 400 shekel in lieu of the gift. And now Avram has the land. But Bnei Chet say, "Listen, we can still, according to the halacha, we could in theory have, we have rights or a claim to the land." Avram says, "No, no, no. Once Ephron relinquished his rights, I'm buying it from you, and therefore I'm giving you the money in lieu of the land." So he gives the money to Ephron, and now Ephron says, "Well, here's the money in lieu of the land." And so now basically what happens is now we can understand why one place in the Pasukim later on in this week's Parsha it says he buys it from Bnei Chet, and another Pasukim later in Parshat Vayechi it says that he buys it from Ephron. In other words, he actually did buy it from him, right? In some ways, he bought it, or there was some sort of transfer of money from Ephron, and in some ways, there was transfer of money or some sort of arrangement that created the relationship between Avram, Ephron, and Bnei Chet. What do we learn from this? Well, first of all, we learn the value of making sure that a business deal is clear and very precise, and there's a deed and everything, a contract and everything else like that. That's the first thing. Second of all, we see the level in which detail that Avram Avinu went to make sure that every aspect of Marat HaMachpelah, which we mentioned at the beginning, quoting the Zohar Kodesh mentions the great aspects of Marat HaMachpelah. He mentions the greatness of Marat HaMachpelah that Avram saw and Ephraim didn't, and therefore Avram Avinu wanted to make sure that there was no way to understand or maybe misinterpret the purchase of Marat HaMachpelah or the acquisition of Marat HaMachpelah in any way, shape, or form. So therefore, what did he do? He made sure that in all aspects it's confirmed as Avram Avinu's land. There's no claim from Bnei Chet because Bnei Chet, he bought the land, or the land was acquired in some way to Avram by Ephron. He was given to him as not as a gift, but as some sort of a gift with some money in lieu of the gift, and also by Bnei Chet, he purchased it from Bnei Chet because he gave the 400 shekel that money goes to, even though it physically went to Ephron, it was actually for the land to be given to Bnei Chet. So we just really understand. First of all, another thing we see from here is the greatness and the understanding and the various aspects and connections between various psukim around Tanakh that teach us about the Zera Shimshon's understanding and knowledge, vast knowledge, but also understanding the intricate importance of looking at the psukim and saying why these words and why these specific words and why these words are mentioned here and later on these words are mentioned here, to understand the connection, the relationship, and really trying to kind of, if you will, take words out of different psukim and really try to put them together and say why these psukim are related to Avram Avinu in this week's parsha, and then later on this week's parsha, and then Parshat Vayechi. We kind of understand the building blocks of what happens when Avram Avinu and how the Torah is written. We understand the greatness of what the Zera Shimshon understood and the layers in which he was able to kind of create these beautiful Torahs. Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and we hope to be back live next week.